I probably grew the most writing this book than I did in any other endeavor in my life, including college, marriage, kids, big things. Writing this book was probably the most transformational for me. And I would say that another key message, away from just the message of hope and that we're not predetermined and all of that, is that
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. Today, just picture this. You're 7 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor with your siblings and your mother, full teacher mode, and your mother is drilling you on French phrases for a move to France that doesn't quite make sense yet. But beneath the language lessons, something else is happening, something that will shape the next several decades of your life. On today's episode, we're joined by Liz Sjaastad, whose debut memoir, You're Too Young to Understand, is already gathering powerful reviews and changing conversations about family trauma and the possibility of healing. So this memoir is about childhood, yes, but also the story of a woman who spent years crafting a book that serves as a bridge to understanding mental illness and a beacon of hope for anyone who's ever feared they might become their parents. Liz's story is inspirational. It's about forgiveness, advocacy, and hope. We're looking forward to an amazing conversation today. Liz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the great introduction.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Thanks. I always like to do a little bit of research beforehand, get to know a little bit what we're talking about here. And your story is very powerful, and so is your book. So it's very meaningful to start off that way. I think it's important, though, that we get a little bit of context to that before we dive too much into it. So I'm wondering, Liz, if you could just fill in the gaps a little bit to us, if you could share us a little bit more about your early childhood experience and what exactly led you to eventually, you know what? Having to write it down on paper. I know it's a lot to fill in, but I'm gonna open the floor out to you.
Oh, absolutely. I'll try to be succinct because that could be a very broad question.
Of course.
Yeah, I feel like we all have interesting childhoods. And when you're in it, you don't really understand how interesting it is. You're living your own normal, nobody else, and maybe until you start spending time at your friends' houses and stuff that you recognize that maybe what you've got going on is a little bit different. But my father was an immigrant. He was a child in World War II in Russia. He was born in Russia, and he lived in a refugee camp after being a prisoner of war with his family in Germany, and immigrated to the United States. Met my mother, who was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. Met her at West Seattle High School, and they fell in love, and they had a very bright future ahead of them. He became a professor, a college professor, and she was an educator as well. But she developed schizophrenia, and he started drinking heavily and became an alcoholic, and likely had a lot of PTSD from his own childhood. So me and my brother and my sister were raised by these folks. And it wasn't until really at the time in my life where I had to step up and care for them at the end of their lives that I started to really kind of check in with that childhood and revisit some of those moments and really try to understand my parents' decisions and their behaviors. And I really, really honestly felt like if I didn't understand them, that I would not fully know myself either. And that kind of, I think, led me to the page. That's when I started writing this book.
Right. And well, first off, I just have to say I very much admire you for being able to have the strength to put this all into paper. I know it's a lot to,
not only live through, but only to reiterate on the pages as you're writing it and just share it with others and just share it on podcasts. So thank you for doing that because I think a lot of people do benefit from hearing these stories.
I agree. Yep.
And that being said, I mean, I'm kind of basing off what you just mentioned about how, you had to work hard to understand everything that was going on. I'm guessing that's sort of where the title of the book came from. You're too young to understand. I'm wondering if that was a case or is it inspired by perhaps something else?
Yeah, it's a layered, when I came, I don't know, for the writers out there, when you title an essay or you title your manuscript and it changes many, many times. And my manuscript changed many times too. And it wasn't until I was in the publishing process that You're Too Young to Understand really hit me. And when I brought it up to a few people and they got goosebumps, I was like, yep, I finally got the right title. But what it came from is layered meaning, of course, but I was too young to understand a lot of things as we are as children, and really complicated things going on with my parents. But it was also something my mother would say to me all the time. So I would ask the questions like, why, you and dad, you don't like each other, because they were very much in love, but they had a very a relationship of conflict and a lot of silence in between the conflict. And so I got the impression they didn't even like each other. And so I would say things like, you could get divorced, if you're waiting for me to graduate high school, you don't have to. But anytime I would ask her things like that, or just even more simple things, she would often say, maybe when you're older, right now you're too young to understand. So she was using that line on me when I was in my 20s. So I was, in her mind, I was never going to be old enough to understand. But then when I take a look at that a little deeper, um, I I really could never understand what was going on with her. Her reality was so different than mine and anyone else's that I knew, that when she said you're too young to understand, to me, it had a very different meaning.
Right, of course. It is very multi-layered, as you mentioned. So, going into a little bit more about the book itself, it does offer a lot of hope for breaking cycles, generational trauma. So, I'm wondering if readers dive into the book and they want to learn a little bit about this, what's the main message that you want the readers to take away from your story?
There are a few messages, there are a few themes in the book, and certainly a motivational message, a message of hope, a message that like how you were raised does not define you, or even who your parents are does not define you, that really we each day have an opportunity to decide how we might want to do things a little differently or a lot differently. I I think, writing this book was pretty late in life, and I probably grew the most writing this book than I did in any other endeavor in my life, including college, marriage, kids, big things. Writing this book was probably the most transformational for me. And I would say that another key message, away from just the message of hope and that we're not predetermined and all of that, is that I really want to broaden people's understanding of schizophrenia and mental illness. And my mother's version of schizophrenia is very different from what most people think of when they hear the term schizophrenia or this person has schizophrenia. People have a lot of ideas on what that looks like. And for her and a lot of people out there, it doesn't look like that. It can be mostly contained and still impact your life and everyone's life around you. You don't have to be dangerous or really incredibly unpredictable to be struggling with uh, one of the schizophrenias. And I think there's so much stigma attached to schizophrenia that the more stories that we hear of people, it affects everyone, anyone. It doesn't decide, just like cancer or diabetes, it doesn't decide who gets it. So I feel like there needs to be a lot more compassion. And I hope that I've done a good enough job in this book showing my own journey of awareness to a place of compassion. I wasn't always compassionate. I didn't have a lot of understanding about the illness. And so it really did allow me to forgive. And I think those messages, I'm very hopeful, are coming across. And from the feedback I'm getting on the book, I think they are. So
Well, hey, it's always great to hear that positive feedback, right? And to know that
yeah.
you are making a difference. And from what I've seen of the book myself, I flipped through what I could see on the Amazon pages, and hey, it's something that really is very powerful and moving. So you've done a great job, and you spent 10 years, actually, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, writing this too, which, to all the authors out there probably can definitely relate to that as well. I'm wondering if you want to share a little bit about that writing process. It's a great many years it took to write this, but for a good reason, being that it was such an emotional task. I'm wondering if you want to shine a little light on that for us.
Yeah, there were so many reasons it took 10 years. When I started writing it, it was right after my father died, and my sister and I were trying to care for our mother long distance. And I was kind of writing to help with my own grief about his death because again, like I said, I was just trying to understand some of his decisions and his history. And then it became something that I wanted to do a lot better. I hadn't been a creative writer before. And so I started taking classes. And it was this wonderful full circle moment where in Minneapolis, we have the Loft Literary Center, and it's a real gem for writers and teachers. And I looked at classes like creative nonfiction. What are the classes? Who's teaching them? And one of the instructors was Laura Flynn. And I had read Flynn's book, Swallow the Ocean, and years and years and years ago. But it really did change my life because she was writing about her mother who had schizophrenia. And so it was just one of those, I'm weeping through the book because someone has put into words what I have experienced. And, when you think you're all alone and then an author does that, like that's another reason to write your stories and get your book out there because you're going to connect with people. Um, so I started taking classes, and during those classes, I started writing the different scenes in the book. And I wasn't writing them in order, I was just writing them. And, it was maybe 4 or 5 years later that I was actually putting them in some sort of order and structure for the book. But for me, I was raising three little kids, and I had a part-time consultancy at that point. And so the writing was really on the side. So whenever I could get to it, but I was really passionate about it. So it was always on my mind. And there were times where I would put it down, as we all do, because we have a writer's block, or it's just too emotional, or we just don't feel like we're good enough. The writing's not where we want it to be. There's so many ways to get discouraged in this process. But ultimately I would take another class, or I would meet up with my writing group, and I'd get that encouragement again, or I'd get that spark, or I'd read my writing after it had been put aside for many, many months. And I'd be like, oh, actually, this is good, because you get too close to your material, I think, to really be the best evaluator of it. And so there was a lot of bumps in the road like that, get excited, write a lot, and then get emotional, writer's block. And then it would just almost psychologically, I would move away from the writing totally, maybe to protect myself. I'm not sure. But then it was an unfinished project that I had told myself, I'm going to finish this book. So I would always come back to it. And so I would say to writers out there that are working on a project and it seems like it's never gonna come to fruition. I just stick with it. So many people in my writing groups did not stick with their material, and that's fine because a lot of people need to walk away and do something else. But if you really want to finish it, like it's keep coming back to it because you'll be in a different place, a different mindset. So yeah, I think, so there was a matter of, the time that I had to devote to it. There were the emotional struggles with self-confidence and then the material that I was working with. And so there were a lot of reasons that it took a long time. But I would say like another thing I did is I always applied for fellowships. I would submit my writing places and did end up getting the mentor series fellowship at the Loft Literary Center, which, each little thing like that, each little like feather in my cap like that gave me a little bit more confidence to say, yes, this is a story that my writing is good, and this is a story that it really should be out in the world.
Right. Well, it's great that you were able to put it aside when you knew you had to, right? And I think that's what helped you keep the momentum in the long run. You didn't, you knew when it was time to pause, just to recuperate and come back when you were ready for it. And that's really important. It's something I think all authors should be aware of, especially when writing in this more of challenging space.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
definitely powerful. I'm wondering now then, throughout that process, every time you did sit down to write, did you have a certain process for choosing which memories and which moments were essential to include versus which ones you had to leave out? Was there a filtering process that you came up with, or maybe what just spoke to you? What was it like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. At first, it was all the scenes or the memories that would just bubble up, and you've got to trust that those are probably important. And so I would write those scenes, and I was really focused on being a good scene writer because that's what I like to read in memoirs. I like the reflection, but I want to be in the scene with the memoirist. And so I really focused on the scenes, and then ultimately it was like looking at all of them and trying to put them together somehow. So it formed a narrative. One of my other goals was to really, I wanted the reader to keep reading. Like I wanted there to be some momentum. I wanted there to be the storyline that you have reason to read the next chapter. Like you're going to find something else out that you've already learned a little bit about. And so a lot of it was that, and then reading it, and I would have a lot of other people read my writing along the way, people in my writing group and teachers that I would then ask to do an edit on whatever I had finished. So I got a lot of feedback, and I learned how to take the feedback that felt right and leave the feedback that didn't. And oftentimes the feedback was, I don't see this chapter fitting with your narrative. Like, I don't think it adds any value. And so oftentimes it was other people actually telling me that they did. And it's one of those, like, you just put it in a different file. You don't, you love your writing, you love something about it. That's why you wrote it. That's why it's in it. But then I really decided to trust a few people, and, I put it aside. So it's not like I'm destroying it. Like if I want to add it back in, it's there. And then there'd be another full read of it, and then we would look at, okay, are there any gaps, right? What new do I have to write about to get the reader to a different point, or to help them understand this character better? And that happened to me a lot. I had to, as a new writer, when I started the book, so much of our experiences as memoirists are in our mind because we've lived them. And so to really get it on page so that the reader can feel, see, smell, be there as much as possible with all their senses was was a wonderful task. And it was something where, well, I don't really understand this character, or your brother's not fully rounded yet. Like there's got to be some aspects of him that you want to share that are more positive. That was a struggle for me in the beginning. And I certainly didn't have an axe to grind. And so, you just kind of go mining in your memory for more material to round out characters too.
Definitely. And so I guess at the end of the day, it really had to do with the feedback from others, right? And seeing what their opinions were, which I think is very important for any writer also, because we need to know what the audience is going to perceive your book as being. So what better way than to running it past to people for feedback, right? So
Uh,
it's great to know. So all that being said, though, I'm wondering, you're out in the promotion phase now. The book is out there, ready for people to pick up and learn from and enjoy. I'm wondering, how does that feel for you to have this personal story out in the world? You mentioned before you've been getting some positive feedback, but what else has it been like? It must be a relief, I guess, if I'm trying to say, to have it out, right?
yeah, it was, it's a lot, kind of finally deciding to publish, and then knowing, like, yeah, that anyone can just pick it up and read it. Like people you admire, people from your childhood and your hometown, and that's obviously, I've gotten a lot of readers from my hometown. And I, I don't have a big problem with this being out there. I think I came to peace with that a long time ago. about sharing personal stories because I think it's so important to do so, particularly stories that are stigmatized. And they're stigmatized. Why? Because no one shares them, So, and then because of that stigma, our family didn't get the help that it needed. So I think, the more we talk about things, the more that people don't feel alone, and the more resources are directed towards those issues. So what I'm hearing from people through my website and through Facebook messaging and people that know me directly is how my book helped them deal with their own stuff in a healthy way. And there was one individual who told me that there are so many people that he wanted to give them the book that he had read that had helped him, which was something for adult children of alcoholics. And he thought, well, that's a really presumptuous to like give somebody that book and say, you need help, here it is. He goes, but I could give them your book and it would do the same for them, but it's a different give, it's like, I read this book, it's really fantastic. It's not like, here, you could use this. So that I think is phenomenal. The other weird or interesting thing that's happening is, um, people are sharing everything now with me. People that have read the book, I think they have there's this parasocial thing, I guess, going on where they know me so well through the book that, they just can walk up to me and start sharing some of their deepest, darkest secrets, without much, you know, um, chit chat, small talk, which I appreciate. And I love that can happen, but it is new for me. So it is a bit of an adjustment.
Understood. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I
Yeah.
think all authors, they dream to be in your shoes, right? To have the book out there, and here you are and spreading it with the world. And, it's just great. And it's inspiration for everybody. Now I have to ask, well, what's next on the agenda? Are you considering writing any other books, perhaps with the content that you decided to leave out, or maybe on any other topics? What's next on the
I have
horizon for you?
Yeah, I have a couple things started, but it's really the promotion of You're Too Young to Understand has really taken a lot of my mental time. But I am going to continue writing. I'm still writing personal essays, and I'm thinking maybe one of those I might be able to expand. I don't have any ideas for book length material or a book length manuscript at this point, but I will
Understood.
continue writing and submitting my personal essays. It feels so good to get them down on paper and um, yeah, have them published.
Right. And, I think you mentioned also you've been writing for Writer's Digest too. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Perhaps
Mhm.
that's part of it too, right? So just another aspect of continuing the writing process.
Yes, and Motherwell magazine has been another great place where I've been able to submit. My kids in the past have been able to poke me in ways just with a simple comment, and it'll hit me really hard, and I'll walk away and go, why do I have such big feelings around what my daughter just said? And so then I'll write, and so those essays have gone to a couple of them have gone to Motherwell magazine, and they've been published, and I really enjoyed those. And I think that's what I'll continue to do. I think when I need to understand something more fully, whether it's somebody else or myself or a controversial topic, I will turn to the page. And some of them end up being something I feel can be published, but most of it's just for myself.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I think that that's a really productive way of getting your feelings out, just going ahead and writing things down. I do the same thing, but even more so that you take it a step farther and you publish it so that others can learn from it too, which I guess is what this memoir is all about at the end of the day too. So,
Right, right. And I've joined my local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they're an organization, a national organization, grassroots, and they focus on advocacy and education and support for families and people struggling with all the mental illnesses, not just the serious ones like schizophrenia. And so I'm going to be doing some work in that area too.
right. So that's NAMI, right? NAMI?
Um, mhm.
Right, got it. Okay, so there you go, everybody. So be sure to check that out as well as You're Too Young to Understand. And I understand that you also can be found on Instagram and you have some websites as well, right? Would you like to share exactly how people can get in touch with you?
Oh, certainly. I do post a lot of reels about stories about my mother and provide a little insight on Instagram. And I think it's just Liz Sjaastad at Liz Sjaastad, Lizsjaastad, Lizsjaastad. And then my website is the same thing. So it's www.lizsjaastad.com. And yeah, those are two great places. You can just go to the website, find more information on the book, and where to find it. Also, the links to the socials are on there.
Understood. So we're gonna put the links to that in the description box of the podcast today also, so everyone could
Okay,
easily find it and go ahead and
thanks.
click on over. So perfect stuff. Now I'm wondering if you happen to have any last bits of advice that you'd like to share with the audience today as we begin to wrap up. But what can they hold with them as they continue on with their day after listening?
Call that person or text that person that you had in a writing class or that you share writing with and, decide to get together via Zoom or coffee. And this is particularly if you're, stuck or you need a new energy. I feel like our fellow writers can help with that energy and you end up helping them too. So I say, don't always go it alone.
Understood. Yeah, and that's kind of what your whole process was about. Sending
Yep,
pieces to others for review, looking for guidance. I think that's exactly what we need to do. People think that writing is a solitary effort, but it's not. You have to really reach out to others. It's a community effort in a way. It's
it
super
is. And even if it's not, even if you don't think you fully need it for your writing, you need it for your emotional health, just, having comrades, having friends,
camaraderie. People on your team, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, people that you can commiserate with and celebrate with. It's really important.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree fully. So everyone take that with you today. Be sure, to reach out to others, look for people to have on your side. You need support in this life, especially in this day and age. So it's great to know that we can do that. And even more so, you can check out Your Too Young to Understand and kind of put yourself in Liz's footsteps and learn a little bit about what she's gone through. So you can also, do the same for yourself and learn from it too. So, Liz, I think this has been a really powerful conversation. Your willingness to share this with us, the difficult experiences. It's what this show is really about. So I appreciate you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. You've been fabulous, Danielle. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too, me too. And if everyone, to everybody listening today, remember if you or someone you love is dealing with mental illness, resources like NAMI, as Liz has talked to us, can also help you too. To all the aspiring authors listening, Liz really has set a great example for us. You take your deepest pain, transform it into your greatest mission. That's the power of purposeful writing. So, Liz, thank you for your courage, your vulnerability, your hope. I think that's been very valuable. And to the listeners, keep writing. Keep sharing, keep believing that your story matters. So until next time, this is the Authors on a Mission podcast. Have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.